This person left you, and that's exactly why you'll win. Because what felt like an ending was actually the beginning of the version of you they were never meant to see. Let me say something you might not be ready to hear yet. Their leaving was not your destruction. It was your interruption from a life where you were slowly shrinking yourself to be loved, and you didn't even notice it. You were adjusting your words, lowering your expectations, explaining your feelings in ways that would be easier for them to accept. You were becoming smaller, just to keep someone from leaving, and then they left anyway. At first, it feels like loss, like rejection, like something was taken from you, but slowly, something else starts to happen. You begin to rise in the only way that matters, not emotionally, but internally. You start to see clearly, not them, but yourself. And here is the truth no one tells you. Some people don't leave you because you are not enough. They leave because you are finally going to become too much for the version of you they were comfortable with. And that is where your real transformation begins, because when they leave, they don't just remove themselves from your life. They remove the illusion you were living inside. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you will understand why their departure was not your downfall, but your alignment with something greater. The version of you that was shrinking. You weren't being loved fully. You were being tolerated partially. There is a version of you that existed before they left, and if you are honest, that version was slowly disappearing, not suddenly, not loudly, but quietly. You started editing yourself. You thought it was love. You thought it was compromise. You thought it was understanding. But in reality, you were shrinking your truth to fit into someone else's emotional capacity. You laughed a little softer. You spoke a little less directly. You forgave things you shouldn't have normalized. And the dangerous part? You called it love. But love that requires you to abandon parts of yourself is not love. It is emotional negotiation. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you were moving in the opposite direction. You were becoming someone easier to stay with, not someone truer to yourself. And the reason you didn't notice it is because love has a way of disguising self-abandonment, until one day they left, and instead of breaking you, it exposed something deeper. You were already breaking yourself to keep them. Their absence didn't destroy you. It interrupted the version of you that was slowly fading away. And in that interruption, something powerful begins to happen. You start remembering yourself again. Not the version they knew, but the version you were before you started shrinking, and that is where the real win begins. What hurts you now will eventually reveal what was never real. Right after they leave, pain doesn't feel like wisdom. It feels like confusion. Your mind keeps searching for a clean explanation, something simple enough to hold on to. But betrayal from absence is never clean. It leaves gaps. It leaves unanswered questions. It leaves you rewriting conversations that can no longer respond. And that is where the suffering deepens, not in their leaving, but in your need to make sense of it. You start asking yourself, was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Was it all fake? Or was it real until it wasn't? And notice something important here. All these questions assume that you were the problem that needs solving, but pain has a strange way of distorting self-perception. Nietzsche once hinted at a brutal truth when he wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But before clarity comes, there is chaos. And that chaos is where your mind starts stripping away illusions. Slowly, you begin to notice patterns you ignored before, moments where you felt unseen, times when your effort wasn't matched, situations where you convinced yourself it's fine when it wasn't. And now, without their presence distracting you, you see it all clearly, not because things changed, but because you are finally not inside the illusion anymore. And this is the first shift toward winning. Pain removes emotional noise, so truth can finally be heard. It doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels heavy, unfair, late. But clarity is never gentle at the beginning, because it forces you to admit something uncomfortable. You were not losing someone who was aligned with you. You were losing someone you were trying to become compatible with. And that realization doesn't break you. It awakens you, because now, for the first time, you are not reacting from attachment. You are seeing from awareness, and awareness is where your comeback begins. The moment you stop chasing them, you start finding yourself. There is a strange shift that happens after clarity. At first, you still feel the pull, the urge to check, to remember, to revisit what once was, but something inside you begins to resist that pull. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a hand slowly releasing its grip. This is where self-worth begins to rebuild itself, not through motivation, not through affirmations, but through absence. Because when someone leaves, they unknowingly give you something they never intended to. Space. And in that space, you start seeing yourself without distortion. You are no longer performing, no longer adjusting, no longer waiting for validation that arrives inconsistently. You begin to notice how much energy you were spending trying to be enough for someone who was already halfway gone, and slowly, that realization turns into something powerful. Self-respect. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And now your actions begin to shift. You stop texting first out of anxiety. You stop explaining yourself to people who misunderstand you repeatedly. You stop lowering your standards just to keep someone emotionally present. It feels uncomfortable at first, because your nervous system is used to chasing, used to hoping, used to overgiving. But now something new is forming inside you. A boundary. And boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are filters to stop self-abandonment. And here is the truth that slowly rises inside you. You were not difficult to love. You were just available to someone who lacked the capacity to love you properly. And that changes everything, because now your focus is no longer getting them back. It becomes getting yourself back. And in that shift, you start winning without even realizing it yet. Why their leaving was your alignment. Sometimes loss is not rejection, it is redirection toward who you were meant to become. There comes a moment in healing where everything stops feeling like chaos, not because everything is fixed, but because you finally stop resisting what happened. And in that acceptance, something unexpected appears. Peace. You start realizing that their leaving was never just about loss. It was about alignment, because not every connection is meant to grow with you. Some are meant to reveal you. Some are meant to disturb your comfort, and some are meant to exit the moment you begin returning to your real self. You begin to see it clearly now. When you were shrinking, they stayed. When you started growing, they left. And that pattern was not accidental. It was directional. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." And in your case, what left your life became the very thing that pushed you toward your own becoming. You stop romanticizing what broke you, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding, because now you see that staying in that dynamic would have required you to stay smaller than your potential. And life has a strange intelligence. It removes what cannot evolve with you, not to punish you, but to realign you. And slowly, something powerful happens inside you. You stop asking, "Why did they leave me?" and start realizing, "What was I becoming when they were here?" And that question changes everything, because now you are no longer defined by their absence. You are defined by your return to yourself. You become more selective with your energy, more intentional with your love, more aware of your own value, and the most important shift of all, You no longer see their departure as a wound. You see it as proof that you were growing in a direction they could not follow. And that is the final truth. They didn't just leave you. They made space for you to finally arrive at yourself. So if someone left you, don't rush to call it loss, because sometimes what leaves your life is not what you needed to keep, but what you needed to outgrow. And when you understand that deeply, you stop breaking, you start becoming, and in the end, that is how you win. Not by getting them back, but by finally getting yourself back.